Welcome back, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you've had a great weekend. We've got a very important matter to discuss here, guys. Certain people on Twitter, elsewhere on social media, they're still trying to say that the word femboy, as you can see in the screenshot, for example, where it's censored, that it's actually a slur. That femboy is a slur against trans femmes. The screenshot saying specifically, "Hi, so femboy is a slur against trans femmes. Info, it was used in R34 to fetishize and degrade trans girls and trans femmes." Yeah. We have the internet's brightest here lecturing all of us about femboys. You know, this is totally accurate information. Definitely not incorrect at all. Definitely not some sort of lunatic take at all. By any stretch of the means. No, this is some factual stuff. Now, I'm really not the best person to talk about this, though, as I don't really know anything about femboys. You know, it's not a topic I know much about at all, as I myself am not a femboy and I don't partake in femboy culture. I would never do such a thing. But as I said, I think I know enough about this to comment on it. And this actually goes back a few years ago to start. Because a few years ago, this rhetoric was being posted on Twitter. And to go back in time a little bit, what you need to know is a few years ago, this sort of rhetoric was not just being posted on Twitter, but it was pretty popular on Twitter too. There were tweets saying that femboy is offensive and or a slur that were getting a lot of likes and support. There were still a lot of people pushing back against those takes, don't get me wrong. It's not like it had universal support, but they were still getting a lot of likes. And a lot of people trying to say, indeed, you can't use this term. Believe it or not, it actually goes back even further. Because before that happened, the same types of people were saying that you can't use the word trap in any context. Important distinction. Any context, meaning not just referring to a trans woman like that, in which you can make the argument that it would be offensive to call a trans woman a trap, you know, for obvious reasons. You can clearly understand why some trans women would not want to be called such things, although, believe it or not, some actually don't mind and do like being called such. But I digress. These people were saying that because some trans women are being called traps, that's offensive, that no one is allowed to use the word trap ever in any context, which, to be quite frank, is absurd. We've seen plenty of traps in anime, for example, where the word would absolutely apply. And believe it or not, there's a lot of people, usually femboys, who don't mind being called trap. And as a matter of fact, would take it as a compliment. Hypothetically, if I was a femboy, I would be one such person. If you were to call me a trap, I would say thank you. But this is not about me. This is about certain types of people on the internet who get way too easily offended by things and simultaneously like to act like they're the Twitter police. They're the internet cops out there. These are people who love to embrace authoritarianism when they're the ones trying to dictate how people can live their lives over things that they're getting, as mentioned, way too easily offended by. And so when it comes to the term trap, we even saw certain subreddits banning the word trap, even ones related to anime, where again, this word is pretty prevalent and it's not offensive, but the subreddit moderators decided this is offensive and no one's allowed to say it because, you know, there's like a fringe group of people who are offended by this, and we all need to bow down to what they demand. As if that wasn't all crazy enough, it actually gets even worse. Because some of the people saying that they're offended by words like femboy and or trap, and that no one is allowed to use them in any context ever, well, some of them were not actually offended. Don't get me wrong, some were, but some actually weren't. They were just trying to pretend that they were so that they could continue trying to erase these terms from existence because, for whatever reason, there's parts of the trans community that literally hates femboys. And they tried to erase the existence of femboys either through A, getting these words like banned so femboys aren't allowed to self-identify as femboys and or traps, etc., or two, perpetuating and promoting egg culture, which is essentially grooming. It's essentially saying like, oh, if you're a dude who likes some feminine things, you're clearly not actually a dude, you're a trans woman. Yeah. So this is how they were going about it. And it's obviously a very disturbing thing, you know. This is disturbing stuff. Fortunately, I have seen parts of the trans community actually calling out that part of the trans community, saying things like they're toxic, they don't belong, that they're just making things worse, you know, etc. So it is good that there was pushback to that stuff even within the trans community. But unfortunately, you're still seeing stuff like this occur. And so over on Reddit and some anime subreddits, they were trying to ban the word trap. Then on social media, people trying to get the word femboy banned. And then they were even suggesting that instead of the word femboy, people use the word roseboy. And it's like, bro, who actually calls himself a roseboy? Like, oh, get the frick out of here. That's ridiculous. This sounds weird. It sounds lame. Like, no, just no. And now in 2025, we're seeing a revitalization of this topic, it looks like, via this tweet. And we get people in the comments talking about this. For example, so first we've got femboys saying transfem is a slur against femboys, and now transfems saying femboy is a slur against transfems. Neither is true for most part. Femboy can be used as a slur to misgender trans women, but it's mostly used for femme gender nonconforming men. So first of all, no, it's actually the wrong order of events. As I told you, that's not what happened. First, it was people getting mad at trap, then getting mad at the word femboy. And I like saying that femboys are calling trans femme a slur against femboys. That is not correct, actually. I haven't seen, from what I've seen at least, I have not seen people saying that's a slur. What I have seen people saying it is actually grooming. Yeah, it's basically grooming. If you have a dude who likes being a dude, but on occasion, or maybe not even on occasion, maybe regularly likes to embrace the feminine side that they have and be a femboy, and you try to say that person's trans, that is not a slur. That is grooming. So let's just establish that fact first of all. Continuing though, another response says femboys means feminine boys. How is that a slur? The OP says, ask them, not me. I have no clue. It's used in derogatory ways against trans femmes, but it's not a slur. Similarly, we've got this comment that says, I don't know if it's exactly a slur. It's just a term that was used against trans femmes and stuff. No, like what the frick, dude? This is like people taking a word where 99% of the context it's not used like that, and then like 99% plus, let's go with, and then because like the most fringe of the fringe examples, that's like less than 1% of the time, they're trying to apply that fringe example as like the majority when it's not. It's ridiculous. Like, dude, when people are saying femboy, they're talking about femboys 99.9% of the time. Adding this part in post-production because I forgot to mention this too, but obviously the second part of that take is also ridiculous. Saying like it's bad to use, implying that it's bad to use in general, even to people who literally want to be called femboys. Like it's not. That's a ridiculous thing to say. And then we actually got an example of a trans masculine person who likes being called a femboy. They say, I call myself a femboy as a trans mask boy who likes to girl. Is this okay? I don't understand the second part of that, not gonna lie. Like, who likes to girl? I don't know what that means. But we can understand the first part at least. Yeah, they like being called a femboy. Got it. So this ultimately means that these things are contextual. And taking a look at the context and with nuance, like I literally just said, 99% of the time the stuff is not being used in a way that's offensive, and the people being called such things either self-identify as those things and or simply enjoy being called those things. So there's no need to make a big fuss and a big problem out of this, unless you have some sort of ulterior motive, you know. So I'll read like one more of these. This one's interesting. Let's take a look at this because we're just talking about context. It says, context matters. It absolutely can be used as a derogatory term towards trans women, and it's disgusting. But femboy alone is its own thing. The issue is when they're used synonymously by chasers. Really depends on how you use the word and towards who. Someone else saying not this again. Yeah. Yeah, here we go again, man. Like, just when you think you're over some of the most brain rot conversations, they pop up once again. Let's take a look at some of the quotes, and we'll end with that. One at the very top here says, femboy and trap is not a slur. Like most things, it can be used derogatory. Spoiler, context matters, but not slurs. The next one reading, femboy is a portmanteau of feminine and boy, and that's it. It is not offensive, except to people who can't handle the existence of gender non-conforming people because their entire worldview and sense of self is built on the idea that wearing a skirt makes them a girl. Yeah, this goes back to what I said earlier about how certain parts of the trans community literally try erasing the existence of femboys and or simply can't conceive the concept of gender non-conforming and how that doesn't make someone trans. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say about this topic. I think that's like all the main stuff and also some of the public reception to this tweet that was making the rounds. As of recording, it's got 113K views on Twitter, 2,100 likes on Twitter as well. But let me know what you think about this stuff in the comments. As always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you. Consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the coverage. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, a great week ahead, and I'll see you in the next one.